The text came through at 6:47 in the morning, while I was still standing at the gate in Terminal C at Reagan National, holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I didn't open it right away. I could see who it was from on the lock screen, and I already knew, the way you know about a phone call at 3 in the morning, that whatever was inside wasn't going to be good. My older sister had sent it. 6 words, "No seat for you, don't come." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time because the brain does that thing where it tries to find another meaning, some softer interpretation, some way the words could mean something other than what they obviously meant. There wasn't one. She had typed exactly what she meant. The flight to Phoenix that I'd helped pay for, the family trip to celebrate our mother's 70th birthday that I'd been planning around for 4 months, the seat I'd booked under my own name months ago. No seat for me. Don't come. My thumb hovered over the reply box for a long time. The gate agent was already calling Group 2. People were lining up. A toddler in a striped shirt was crying somewhere to my left, and his mother was telling him in that patient, drained voice that they were almost there, almost on the plane, almost done. I watched her crouch down and wipe his nose with her sleeve. I thought about how my mother used to do that for me, before things changed. I typed one word back. Understood. Then I locked the phone and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket, the one closest to my chest, where I keep things I don't want to lose. Group 2 was boarding. I was in Group 3. I had paid for an upgrade out of my own checking account 3 weeks ago because my brother-in-law had texted me complaining that the middle seats were too tight and could I please see if I had any miles to share. I'd given him my miles. I'd taken the middle seat. I was 31 years old, and I was still doing things like that. Still trying to earn a place at a table I was apparently never going to be invited to. I should explain something before I keep going, because otherwise none of this will make sense. My family doesn't know what I do for a living. Not really. They know I'm in government. They know I work in Washington. They know I travel a lot and don't talk about my job. And they have, for the last 7 years, decided collectively that this means I am either a glorified secretary, a failed academic who couldn't make it in the private sector, or something embarrassing they shouldn't ask about at dinner parties. The truth is more complicated. The truth is also classified in pieces. But the part I can say out loud is that I am a senior intelligence officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency, and at the time of that text message, I had just come off a 14-month operation in a part of the world I will not name, and I was finally going home for what was supposed to be a week of birthday cake and pool floats and my mother turning 70 with all of her children around her. I didn't tell them what I did, because I wasn't allowed to. Then I didn't tell them because I'd gotten used to not telling them. Then I didn't tell them because I'd started to wonder, sometime around year 4, if maybe they didn't want to know. If maybe the version of me they'd settled on, the disappointing middle daughter who couldn't hold a normal job and never came home for Easter, was easier for them than whatever the truth might be. So I stood at that gate, drinking cold coffee, and I thought about it. I really did. I thought about turning around and going back to my apartment in Arlington and ordering Thai food and watching reruns of something stupid and pretending the text hadn't happened. I had every right to do that. Nobody would have blamed me. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about being the one who left, the one who got out, the one who built something different. You never stop wanting to go home. You can be 31 or 51 or 71, and that little ache, that pull toward the place where you were a kid, or someone tucked you in and called you by your full name when you were in trouble, it doesn't go away. You just learn to walk around with it. I got on the plane. I had paid for the ticket. The seat was mine. My sister could text me whatever she wanted, but she didn't own the airline, and she didn't get to decide whether I flew home for my own mother's birthday. That was the version of myself I needed to be that morning, the one who didn't curl up and apologize for existing. I'd worked too hard to be anything else. The flight was a Boeing 737, full to capacity, going from DCA to Sky Harbor in Phoenix. I had seat 14C, an aisle. I put my bag in the overhead, sat down, buckled in, and stared at the back of the seat in front of me. The man next to me was on the phone with someone, telling them he loved them, that he'd call when he landed. I tried not to listen. I always try not to listen to people on phones in airports, but it never works. You hear everything. The whole human condition gets played out at 25 gates simultaneously all day long. I should tell you about my family now, because the next part won't land if you don't understand the shape of it. My mother, who was turning 70 that weekend, was the kind of woman who measured love in casseroles and clean countertops. She wasn't cruel. She was just from a generation that believed in not making a fuss. And she had married a man who believed in making fusses about everything except the things that actually mattered. My father had passed 4 years before. After he died, my mother got smaller. Not physically, just smaller in the way she took up space in a room. She stopped having opinions. She started agreeing with whoever was loudest. And the loudest, by a wide margin, was my older sister. My older sister is 42. She is a real estate agent in Scottsdale, married to a man who sells commercial insurance, and she has 2 children, a boy of 9 and a girl of 6, who I love very much and who I see about once every 18 months because their mother has decided I am a bad influence. I have never been told what makes me a bad influence. I've never smoked, I've never been arrested. I send birthday cards with cash in them like a normal aunt. But somewhere along the way, my older sister decided that I was the wrong kind of daughter, the wrong kind of sister, the wrong kind of woman, and she has spent the last decade quietly convincing the rest of the family of the same thing. My younger brother is 28, an electrician in Mesa, recently married to a woman I genuinely like, and he is what my mother used to call easygoing, which in our family is code for won't say anything to make his sister angry. He has never sided with me on anything. He has also never sided against me. He just stands there and looks at his shoes when things get hard. I have spent a lot of my adult life trying to forgive him for that. And then there was me, the middle one, the one who left when I was 18 to go to Georgetown on a scholarship my family didn't fully understand, and who never really came back. I had moved through college and graduate school and into a career that I couldn't talk about, and the further I went, the further away from them I got, until I was something they pointed at across a holiday table and made jokes about. "Oh, she's probably saving the world," my brother-in-law would say with that little smirk, and everyone would laugh, and I would laugh too, because what else were you supposed to do? The text that morning hadn't come out of nowhere. My older sister had been escalating for months. She'd taken over the planning of my mother's birthday. She moved it from the original date so it wouldn't conflict with one of her son's soccer tournaments, even though that meant I had to rebook everything. She'd told my mother that I was being difficult about the flights. She'd told my brother that I was too important now to make time for family. None of this was true. I had said yes to every single thing she'd asked of me. I had paid for half of the rental house in Sedona. I had agreed to drive my mother to her hair appointment, even though I was going to be jet-lagged out of my mind. I had said yes, 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 yes. But sometime in the last 48 hours, my sister had decided that wasn't enough. Maybe she'd had a fight with her husband. Maybe she just woke up that morning and wanted to be cruel. Maybe she'd realized that if I came home, my mother might actually pay attention to me, might actually be glad to see me, and that was a kind of competition my sister couldn't tolerate. I don't know. I'll never know. People who are cruel rarely tell you why. The plane started to push back from the gate. I closed my eyes. I told myself I would not cry on this flight. I would not. I would land in Phoenix. I would rent a car. I would drive myself to the rental house in Sedona, and I would walk in the front door, and I would smile at my mother and hug her and give her the silver pendant I'd had made for her in Istanbul 2 years ago, and never gotten the chance to give her. That was the plan. That had to be the plan. About 6 minutes after we pushed back, while we were taxiing toward the runway, the cabin lights flickered once, and then the engines changed pitch. We slowed. Then we stopped completely. On a stretch of taxiway between gates, the flight attendant stood up and went toward the front of the plane. There was a small commotion I couldn't see. The man next to me sighed and said something about how he always picked the broken flight. Then the intercom crackled and the captain came on. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reyes. I apologize for the delay. We're going to be holding here briefly. I've been informed that we have a Department of Defense priority passenger aboard, and I need to confirm her presence before we continue. I'd ask everyone to please remain in their seats." The cabin got very quiet. People started looking around. A teenager across the aisle from me actually stood up and craned her neck like she was trying to spot a celebrity. The man next to me said, "Huh," and went back to his phone. I knew, the moment the captain said it, what was happening. I knew exactly what was happening, and I felt the blood leave my face. You have to understand, this kind of thing is not supposed to happen. There are protocols. There are very specific protocols about how my agency moves people, and one of those protocols, an ironclad one, is that you do not draw attention. You don't pull people off planes. You don't announce them. You don't, under any circumstances, make a scene. But there are exceptions. There are exceptions when an operation has, for reasons above my pay grade, been compromised or escalated, and an officer needs to be relocated immediately. I had been off-grid for 14 months, and I had come back 2 days ago, and I had been told I was clear, I was done, I was on leave. Apparently I was not. The forward cabin door opened. 2 men in plain dark suits stepped onto the plane. I knew one of them by face. His name was Marcus, and he worked out of the Pentagon liaison office, and he had been at my swearing-in 9 years before. He scanned the cabin once, professionally, and his eyes landed on mine. He gave me the smallest nod imaginable. Then he walked down the aisle, and he stopped at row 14, and he said, quietly enough that only I could hear him, "Ma'am, I need you to come with us. There's a vehicle on the tarmac." I unbuckled my seatbelt. My hands were not steady. The man next to me had stopped looking at his phone and was now staring openly. The whole cabin was staring. I stood up. I reached up to get my bag from the overhead, and Marcus said gently, "I've got it." He took it down for me. Then he gestured for me to walk ahead of him toward the front of the plane. I want to tell you what that walk felt like, and I'm going to try, but I don't know if I have the words for it. Imagine spending 9 years being a ghost. Imagine being the joke at the holiday table. Imagine being told, 3 hours earlier, that there was no seat for you, that you shouldn't come home, that you weren't wanted, and then imagine walking down the aisle of a Boeing 737 with 2 intelligence officers behind you, while every single passenger watched, and feeling for the first time in your adult life that someone had seen you, that you existed, that the work you had done in places you couldn't name had been real, had been witnessed, had mattered to people whose names you didn't even know. I didn't cry. I want to be very clear about that. I didn't cry because I had learned a long time ago that crying in front of strangers was a thing I didn't do anymore. But I felt something break open in my chest, something I had been holding shut for a very long time. When I got to the front of the cabin, Captain Reyes had stepped out of the cockpit. He was an older man, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of posture that told you he'd flown in the military before he'd flown commercial. He looked at me. He looked at Marcus, then he straightened up and he saluted. I want you to understand what that means in the small etiquette of these things. Civilian captains do not salute. They are not in uniform in that way, but this man, Captain Reyes, had been a naval aviator, and he knew what my clearance level meant the moment Marcus showed him the paperwork, and he had decided on his own to do this thing. He said, "Ma'am, thank you for your service. Safe travels." I returned the gesture. I'm not in the habit of saluting in civilian clothes either, but you do what the moment asks of you. I said, "Thank you, Captain." Then Marcus walked me down the jet bridge. There was a black SUV waiting on the tarmac at the bottom of a set of stairs. We got in. The plane behind us, I learned later, was held for another 12 minutes while my paperwork was processed and the flight was cleared to depart. The passengers watched all of it from their windows. In the SUV, Marcus handed me a folder. He told me what was happening. There was a situation in the Maghreb. They needed me on a different aircraft, a different airport, within the hour. The Phoenix trip was cancelled. The birthday was cancelled. The week of pool floats and birthday cake was, like so many things in my life, cancelled. I sat with a folder in my lap, and I looked out the window of the SUV as we drove across the airfield toward a different terminal, and I thought about my mother, who was probably awake by now in the rental house in Sedona, drinking her coffee and looking out at the red rocks. I thought about how I was going to call her, later, from a secure phone in a building she didn't know existed, and I was going to tell her I couldn't make it after all. I was going to tell her I was sorry. I was going to tell her I loved her. I was not going to tell her that her oldest daughter had texted me at the gate that morning to say there was no seat for me, because that was my mother's birthday, and you don't put things like that in your mother's hands on her birthday. You carry them yourself. But here's where the story bends, and here is the part I have thought about more than any other. While I was in the SUV, while we were driving across the airfield, my phone buzzed. It was my sister. 3 quick messages. What is happening? People are texting me from the flight. There's a video. There was, in fact, a video. Someone on the flight had filmed the whole thing, the captain's announcement, the 2 officers walking down the aisle, the salute. It had been posted to a social media account at 7:14 a.m., and by 9:30 a.m., it had been shared 40,000 times. By noon, it was on the local news in Phoenix. By the evening, somebody had figured out, through old yearbook photos and a wedding announcement my sister herself had posted years before, who I was and who my family was. My phone, by the end of that day, had 237 unread messages. I didn't read most of them. I was in a briefing room in Maryland by then, with a different set of clothes and a different passport, getting ready to leave the country again. But I did read the one from my mother, which came in at 6:14 p.m. Eastern Time. It said, "I don't understand what I saw, but I love you. Call me when you can. I am sorry. I am sorry." 3 words my mother had not said to me in 9 years. I want to tell you that I called her right away and that we cried and made everything okay. But that's not what happened. I didn't call her for 3 days because I couldn't, because of where I was. When I finally did call her, from a phone in a consulate I will not name, she was quiet for a long time before she spoke. She said, I should have asked you what you did. I should have asked you for 9 years. I am so sorry." I told her it was okay. I told her I loved her. I told her I would be home for Christmas, and I meant it. I did not call my sister. I have not called my sister. I have not called my sister. It has been almost 2 years now, and I have not called her, and I will tell you why. I could have done a lot of things. I could have let the video keep spreading. I could have given an interview. I could have, when reporters came knocking at my sister's real estate office in Scottsdale and asked her about the woman in the video, said anything I wanted. I had every right. I had every motive. I didn't. I had Marcus's office issue a brief polite statement asking that my privacy and that of my family be respected. I had the original video taken down where I could. I refused every interview request. When my sister's business started getting 1-star reviews on the internet from strangers who'd watched the video and decided she was a monster, I had a friend at the agency call her broker and quietly explain that the situation was being managed and that nothing further needed to be said. I protected her. I protected the family that had not protected me. I did this because somewhere in the SUV that morning, somewhere between the runway and the secure terminal, I made a decision about who I was going to be. I had spent my whole life being the daughter who took the middle seat, I was not going to become, in one morning, the daughter who burned the house down. The work I do, the real work, the work I cannot tell you about, requires a kind of discipline that doesn't switch off when you go home. You keep the quiet things quiet. You let the loud people be loud. You go to bed at night knowing what you did and didn't do, and that has to be enough. My mother is 72 now. I see her 4 times a year. I take her to lunch at a place in Sedona that does a good chicken salad, and we don't talk about my sister, and we don't talk about my job. We talk about her garden. We talk about the cardinal that comes to her bird feeder every morning. We talk about my father, sometimes, when she's feeling brave. She holds my hand across the table when we say goodbye, and she squeezes it twice before she lets go, which is something she used to do when I was a little girl, and she was dropping me off at school. My brother and I have started talking again, not a lot, but he texts me on my birthday, and he sent me a picture of his new baby last spring, and I have framed it on the shelf above my desk, next to a coin that was given to me by a man whose son I once helped bring home from a place that wasn't safe. I do not speak to my sister. I do not expect to. The last I heard, she had moved her real estate practice to Tucson and remarried a man I have never met. She does not reach out, and I do not reach out, and I have made my peace with that. Some bridges you don't rebuild. Some bridges you just leave standing, with no one on either side, and you walk around them for the rest of your life. That is allowed. Nobody tells you that as a kid, but it's allowed. What I learned that morning at the gate in Reagan National is that the people who shut the door on you don't get to be the ones who decide who you are. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be small enough to fit through the gap my family had left open for me. And then one morning, a stranger in a uniform looked at me and saluted, and I realized I had been a whole person all along. I had just been waiting for someone to confirm it, and the someone was never going to be them. If you are reading this and you have a family that doesn't see you, that has decided who you are without ever asking, that texts you at 6 a.m. to tell you there's no seat for you, I want you to know 2 things. The first is that you do not have to set the world on fire to prove them wrong. The work you've done is real, whether or not they ever acknowledge it. The life you've built is real. The person you are, the one who shows up, who keeps going, who tucks the cold coffee into the trash can and walks onto the plane anyway, that person is real. You don't need an audience. You don't need a salute. You don't need a viral video. You just need to know. The second thing is that sometimes, every once in a great while, the audience comes anyway. Sometimes a stranger in a uniform sees you. Sometimes your mother, after 9 years of silence, sends you 3 words you didn't know you were waiting for. Sometimes the world tilts just enough that the people who never asked have to ask. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can burn it all down. You can become loud. You can take everything that was taken from you and try to take it back twice over. Or you can do what I did. You can keep the quiet things quiet. You can let your mother hold your hand across a table at a place that does a good chicken salad. You can frame the picture of your brother's baby. You can let your sister go gently, without poison, into a life that has nothing to do with yours. You can decide that the salute, in the end, wasn't the point. The point was the walk down the aisle. The point was knowing, for the first time in your life, that you'd been seen. After that, what anyone else did or didn't do became, in the strangest and most freeing way, none of your business. I think about that morning sometimes when I'm on a layover somewhere, or when I'm sitting in my apartment in Arlington watching the light come up over the Potomac. I think about the toddler in the striped shirt, and his mother wiping his nose. I think about the man next to me on the plane telling someone on the phone that he loved them. I think about Captain Ray's, who I never saw again, and who I hope is well. And I think about my mother's hand squeezing mine, twice, before she lets go. That, in the end, is what I went home for, not the birthday, not the cake, not the rental house in Sedona. I went home for the hand. And one day, 4 months after that morning, I got the hand back. And that was enough. That has been enough ever since. I've thought about that morning at Reagan National more times than I can count, and the thing I keep coming back to isn't the salute. It isn't Captain Reyes standing in the aisle, or Marcus carrying my bag down the jet bridge, or even the video that ended up on my phone 2 hours later. What I keep coming back to is the cold coffee in my hand at the gate, and the choice I made in the 30 seconds between reading my sister Vivienne's text and typing the word understood. That was the moment. Everything else was just consequence. Cause and effect work in ways we don't see when we're inside them. For 9 years, I had let my family build a version of me that wasn't true, and I had let them, because correcting it felt like making a fuss, and making a fuss wasn't something I'd been raised to do. Every time I stayed quiet, I taught them that staying quiet was acceptable. Every time I took the middle seat, I taught them I belonged in the middle seat. Vivienne didn't text me at 6 in the morning because she woke up cruel. She texted me because she had been allowed for a long time to believe that I would absorb whatever she sent. The cause was years of my own silence. The effect was a message I never should have received. But here's the part I want you to hear. When the moment came, when the captain stood up and the 2 officers walked down the aisle, I did not use the power that had been handed to me. I could have. I had every legal, moral, and emotional right. Instead, I had Marcus's office issue a quiet statement, and I let the story fade, and I protected the family that had not protected me. People have asked me, over the years, if that was weakness. I want to tell you clearly that it was not. Strength isn't the loudest thing in the room. Sometimes strength is the thing that chooses not to speak when it has every reason to. Character is built in the choices nobody sees. The integrity to do hard work in places that will never thank you. The wisdom to know that revenge feels good for an hour and ruins you for a decade. The grit to keep walking through the gate, onto the plane, into your own life, when the people who were supposed to hold the door open for you have shut it. My mother got 9 years back the morning she sent me those 3 words. I am sorry, and I got something I hadn't known I was missing. Not vindication. Not victory. Just the chance to sit across a table in Sedona and have her hand squeeze mine twice before she let go. If you take anything from what I've told you, take this. Build the kind of life that doesn't need an audience to be real. Do the work when nobody is watching. Stay kind when nobody is keeping score. And when the world finally turns and sees you, don't burn anything down. Walk forward quietly, the way you always have, and let the people who shut the door figure out the rest on their own. That's the only revenge worth having, and it's the only one I have ever needed.